All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Stephanie Martins with the Arcadia Association of Realtors, and I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Just to remind everyone, this session is being recorded, so if you unmute your microphone or if you turn your camera on, then please be aware that your likeness may be recorded for later viewing as part of the presentation. At this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to our main speaker, Ami Adini. And Ami, we thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and sharing some extremely valuable information about environmental concerns. Thank you so much, and we will turn it right over to you.
Well, all right. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, everybody, for being here and joining us. And I hope that I will make your time valuable. And so that I do not get distracted when I talk to you and I don't have to watch my moving lips. I will stop my video right now and I will turn it on back later. All right. So I hope you hear me well. You're hearing me well. And the subject of today is evaluating environmental risk concerns, phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments, process and case studies. This class is more developed than the previous ones that we submitted, because in this class we will get a little bit more in depth into some real cases that we handled through the phase 1 and phase 2 studies. The Lee Iacocca of Ford fame and Chrysler fame, and he was the one that invented the Ford Mustang at the time. And he said, we are continually faced by great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as insoluble problems. So I thought I should share this with you. And again, I'm Ami Adini. I'm an environmental professional and have been doing it since 1988, phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment, contamination cleanup and abatement. And I've been delivering these introductory consultations ever since, always free of charge because I don't charge for education. The genesis of the phase 1 is going back to 1986. Even before that, back in the 1970s, there was a big national trauma with a famous Love Canal site in the state of New York that was heavily contaminated. And then the United States Congress enacted a law that was called Superfund, or CERCLA. CERCLA is an acronym, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act. And they enacted it in the late 70s in order to have some money to clean up all these contaminated sites. In 1986, they felt that they needed to correct the law of the 1970s and provide the innocent landowner defense. The previous law was very onerous, and in that they could put anyone on the hook. If you owned the property 40 years ago and you bought it in good faith and you thought it was clean, and you sold it to 5 others, then it went through a chain of like 5 other owners, and come today and they find that the property is contaminated. By the previous law, they could go after anyone that ever had an ownership on the property. To make the long story short, the Congress enacted an amendment of innocent landowner defense, where they said, well, okay, if you purchase a land and you did not know that it was contaminated and you purchase it in good faith, then we will get you off the hook. We will not go after you to clean it up. However, in order to be awarded or entitled for the innocent landowner defense, you had to prove that you had no knowledge of the situation. And this process of proving that you had no knowledge of the situation, they called it all appropriate inquiry at the time. And that developed into a phase 1, that the purpose of the phase 1 was to defend, to protect the innocent landowners from those attacks, if you wish, of the government in case they found the property was contaminated. So this is how it all started. And this research into innocent landowner defense, they called it all appropriate inquiry, except at the time they did not define what it was. They called it phase one. There was no definition. And we entered this field in 1988, right after the law was enacted. Our company and myself, we were some of the very first pioneers to move into this field of all appropriate inquiry, or the phase one environmental assessment. And we did the city of Arcadia back in early 1988, January, February 1988, where we cleaned up this 1 acre site behind the Embassy Suite Hotel. At the time, it was about $1 million cleanup. In today's money, it probably would be $2 or $3 million. From there, still in 1988, mid of 1988, Texaco USA had a big judgment against them. It's a celebrated the Pennzoil judgment, and they were, I should say, punished or penalized or whatever with $11 billion. $11 billion at the time was big money. Not only today, it was at the time even much bigger. And they needed to liquidate in a hurry a lot of oil fields. So we were retained by them, and we did the 72 oil fields in California. We did phase one on them so that they can sell them. And from there on, we moved to a city of Anaheim, again in 1988. The city wanted to redevelop all of what is today's civic district there. Here is the city hall is over here. And it was about 500 properties, and it took us about, I think, about 5 years. And we went door to door and did phase one and phase two and found all kinds of tanks that nobody knew about them. So this was in 1988. And from there, we moved to remove a lot of tanks, and because tanks were contaminating the environment. So we removed a lot of, maybe over 2,000 tanks, underground buried tanks, and we installed the new tanks. We found that we removed tanks. The owners usually wanted to put the new tanks instead. So we became an installation contractor for doing tanks in gasoline station. Here is a Casco station in Poway, very nice station. And we installed huge tanks here underground, and all the pumps we installed, we did not do the canopy. And here is on the left, bottom left side, here's a small tank that we removed a couple of years ago. And on the upper right, upper left, it's a gas station in East LA. This one we did, I believe, in early 1990s. So I'm sorry. And from there, we moved to do the phase two environmental site assessment, and where we drilled holes. And here on the upper left side, you see a big rig. We use it to install wells down to groundwater or to go very deep. On the bottom left, here we explore for buried tanks in the ground with electromagnetic devices. Middle bottom, we are inside the building here using this machine to penetrate and go down to groundwater at 40 feet below grade and take samples. This is an industrial facility. On the bottom right, we drill by hand. This is my associate, Neil, and we are drilling here by hand, going down, taking soil samples. And on the upper right here, we are taking soil vapor samples. We will show it in more details later on. We're basically collecting vapor samples from the soil. Sorry. We had a fleet of 6 trailer-mounted and truck-mounted machines where we were going and extracting gasoline from the ground. We were extracting sometimes free gasoline that was floating on the groundwater, and other times we were extracting the gasoline vapors and from the ground, and in this way cleaning up contamination. And we did it. We had these machines between 2000 and 2012. For myself, I graduated in 1964 with a BSc in mechanical engineering back in Israel, in Haifa, on the East Mediterranean shore. This is Mount Carmel, where we studied and had some good life there. And in addition to my BSc in mechanical engineering, I had additional credit in nuclear and chemical engineering, and moved to work for the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission 8 years. first in the operation and then into the construction and maintenance of nuclear facilities, and moved from there to a short stint with Israeli refineries here in 1973, and from there to the chemical plants, Dead Sea, about 400 meters below sea level. Pretty hot over there, was maybe 130 degrees in the summer. And in California, I participated in the startup of an boric acid plant in Boron, California for US borax, and became immigrated to 1977, immigrated United States, became a citizen in 1985. 1989 became a general engineering contractor. I could do anything and everything, but I used this license to specialize in the remediation of contaminated land, and with additional certification in the hazardous substance removal, because when we are dealing with hazardous substances, we have to be certified for that and pass some strict examinations in order to be able to do that. And here is a recent site, 2019-2020, where we exercise this contract license that we have to clean up a site in Silver Lake in Los Angeles, and where we removed about 1,000 cubic yards of a pesticide contaminated soil. More on it later. You are always welcome to visit our website. You will find the newsletters, and they are very light in language and very rich in pictures and images. I think you will find them very easy to understand. So the subject of today is phase 1 and phase 2, and I'll show you some real examples. And what the heck is a phase 1? I hope I will be able to respond to this question. And phase 1, some of the questions that we always faced. Phase 1 environmental site assessment, what does it do? Even important, that what does it not do? We find that there are some misconceptions out there as to what phase 1 can do, and not too many are aware of what it cannot do or what it is not intended to do, and we will touch on that today. Phase 2 environmental site assessment, is it always necessary? Of course not. What's the cost of the phase 2? How long does it take? We will respond to that. And contaminated party, is it the end of the deal? It is not, and I will show you some examples where it is not the end of the deal, and I'll show you even how much it costs not to be the end of the deal. And do all contaminated properties require cleanup? No. And questions, we will leave a few minutes at the end for questions. And but I invite all of you and any one of you to contact me anytime by telephone, by text, by email, and I promise that I will give you unlimited time to respond to any question that you have, even if you want to send me some reports that you receive and you may not understand everything that is there. I will be happy to interpret it for you. As I said, I don't charge for education. So plume, we use a lot the word plume in our language, in our lingo. It comes from feathers, and the whole idea is something that starts at a point and then like a feather and expands. And here we see here a picture of these plumes of smoke coming out from the stacks, and it starts at the point and then it expands. You see, so here we have a plume of smoke. And so we use it in our environmental lingo to call the word plume, to call these contaminations that start at a point and go from there. Here we have, on the left side, we have an underground storage tank, and it is leaking. And the turquoise color, this is the aquifer. And the aquifer is basically soil, rock, sand, all kind of rock which are saturated with water. It is not a river, it is not a lake. It is like you go to the beach and you dig a hole in the beach sand and you got water coming at you. That's an aquifer. It is sand in the beach, it is sand which is saturated with water. So this is an aquifer. So here we have on the left side The tank is discharging some substance that evidently, as we can see, it's heavier than water, and it goes down to the bottom of the aquifer, to the bedrock, and there it pancakes, it spreads down. Here on the right side, we have this above ground tank in this case, which is leaking the kind of reddish color plume. And it's evidently this is something which is lighter than water because it floats on the groundwater, and it evaporates and it sends those vapors and they go into this building. The vapor intrusion into building, that's has become a major issue of concern in recent years to the regulatory agencies, much more so than groundwater contamination and soil contamination, because this is kind of sneaky, okay? Vapor, it can enter into buildings, and the tenants, the inhabitants, the dwellers may not even know that they are inhaling toxic vapor, because it could be pretty diluted to the degree that they don't smell it, but it is still there and could be pretty toxic. And there are many cases like this, and we, the environmental industry and the regulators, have become concerned about it. You see here on the left side, there is a landfill. This is a conceptual picture. And the landfill is leaking, and we have this plume going down to water and floating on the aquifer, migrating under the building and evaporating into the building. Here is another picture of the similar stuff, and where it shows, here is on the left side, there is a plume, and it shows, you see contaminated soil, and it also evaporates in the soil. It doesn't only have to come up from the water, it can migrate inside the soil, like sideways, laterally here. From left to right, it can move into in the soil and get under the building and enter through the cracks in the slab, through the crawl space, through the floor cracks. The issue has become, as I said, has become of a concern, and EPA did a recent study in recent years, and they tested the vapor intrusion into buildings into over 800 sites, 800 properties all over the United States. Now, their findings was quite interesting and very important. We have in our language what we call attenuation factor. Here on the left side, attenuation factor. When something attenuates, it becomes less, all right? So you can put a sound wall on the freeway, and it will attenuate the noise from the vehicle, so it will not enter into the neighborhood behind the sound wall. We have a double pane glass windows, and they attenuate the noise that coming from the outside and enter our space of living. So attenuation is making less. So in the past, not in the past, when we have a soil, here you have a soil, and we measure, we test the soil vapor, and we find 1,000 units of contaminated vapor here. Our formula in the past told us, the experience in the past, previous experience, previous assumptions was that if we have 1,000 in the soil, what will enter into the building will be 1, because it will get attenuated. By the time the vapor moves through the soil, it becomes less. By the time it enters into the basement, it becomes less. It loses in force, it loses in intensity. So we said, okay, if we have 1,000, we have 1 in the building. 1,000 in the soil, 1 in the building. Well, the EPA came now and said, no, oh, no. Our studies are showing on the average, you're getting 30. If you have 1,000 in the soil, you have 30. So this is 30 times more inside the building. And this kind of changes our modus operandi. It changes our basis of operation, where many properties that before we gave them a clean bill of health and because of toxic vapors, now when we measure this vapor in the soil, we get a lot more properties that we kind of say, we are having some concerns about them. So here is an example, case 1, real example. Our client owns this property here, the apartment building, and a consultant, not our company, another consultant did a phase 1, and they became concerned about the dry cleaners here in this building here. That's about 250 feet away from our building. So this distance is about 250 feet away. And they were concerned about vapors that could migrate under this apartment building. Our client retained us to do the phase 2. And we came there, we sucked out the vapor from around the building, from the soil around the building. And we came back and say, yes, there is contamination. There is this kind of, I depict it as a cloud, subterranean cloud, toxic cloud, if you may, and of a toxic chemical that is migrating from this dry cleaner here under your building. So that's a quote unquote, it's the bad news, but the good news is that the level of contaminants is very low. By the time it reached your building is so low, you don't have any reason to be concerned about it. We do the report, we give it to the bank, and the bank is happy, and they make the loan to the property, on the property. And the cost of our report, the survey, was $7,000. And as you can see in the picture here, everybody was happy. They were happy. They were happy to pay us because they got the loan. The loan was, I can believe, it was a couple of $1 million. So it was something substantial. Here is another case, and where the investor developer is interested in this building, and a lot of work has been done here. They already have the phase 1, the phase 2, the site assessments. They know everything, and they sent us the report, and we review the report. As I told you before, we do it free of charge. We just look at the report, and doesn't take me much time to understand what is there and give an evaluation. And here is what I say to them. Look, this dry cleaner here, yes, they contaminated you. The vapors under the building, under this complex, are high. The levels are high. And there are such levels that you need to defend, you need to protect the dwellers here in the building. He says, okay, what do I need to do? If you buy this building, you will have to do it. I say, well, okay, you use the technologies that we have today for methane, and we use it also to protect from other toxic vapors. This is a diagram that I pulled out from courtesy of Los Angeles County Department of Public Works from their website. And this is a standard diagram that shows how you protect, how you defend, how you mitigate or abate methane from entering into buildings. So here is the building, and what you do, you dig down. Hopefully, before you build, before you put the building there, of course, you dig down excavation, and you put the pipe here. This is a slotted pipe, and above the pipe is buried in the sand. Above it, you put a concrete floor. You put some sensors here. I'm sorry, here is the concrete floor, the gray stuff, and you put some sensors here that can sense methane. And the methane gets into the perforated pipes and goes out in a vent that go out to the atmosphere. If needed, we can put a pump here inside this vent, a blower that sucks out like a vacuum cleaner and sucks out by force all the vapors, all the methane, the gas that is coming here. And this way we protect the building. Now, if this is an existing building, then what we do, we cannot go under the building. We put those wells here on the left side. You see these wells, and these pipes go into the ground. They are perforated at the bottom. And these wells here you see in the upper side, there is a pipe you connect to the top side of the well, and this is a suction pipe. It goes into a header here, and the header goes into this suction blower. And in this way, we vent out all these wells around the building and pull out the methane or the vapor from under the building. So that's how you do it. And they say, ask how much, and we tell them $400,000. You want to get into the deal, put $400,000 aside to do this mitigation or abatement system. And now they got a number they can put into the equation and decide if they want the deal or not. Here is another case. Our client was very interested and actually purchased this building here. It is close to LAX, and they wanted to put a car rental business there. And Excuse me for just a second. Yeah, so they wanted to put a car rental business there, and they told us, Ami, what do we need to do? I mean, we know that the area is contaminated. Here is the property on the bottom side. It's a celebrated case. It's all over the internet, and we have all the reports. And they contaminated soil, they contaminated groundwater, and they contaminated the soil vapor in a large way. And it migrated onto these properties of our clients, and they wanted to move into it. So what do they need to do? We told them, well, okay, we did the investigation, we poked hole, and we gave them the picture, and they said, well, you need to protect yourself from vapor entry into the building. And you do it in the way that we showed before for the other transaction. And in this case, they decided to go into the building and remove the floor from the building and do it like a brand new under the building system. So here are some pictures. Here is a plan. We did a plan for them. This is the footprint of the building. And the dashed lines are all these perforated pipes that we put into the soil, under the building. And these perforated pipes are connecting to the solid line pipes, which go outside to vertical vent pipes. So this is in the soil. This is a diagram, and here is in real life. You see here the building, and you can see they removed the entire slab under the building, and they dug out the trenches for the perforated pipes. Here is another picture of the trenches under the building. And here is another picture showing the pipes. These pipes, these are 4-inch pipes, plastic pipes, and they are slotted. You don't see the slots, but believe me, they are slotted all over. And the trenches are lined with a fabric cloth, okay, which is perforated, permeable. And we put, you see they put pea gravel here, crushed rock or pea gravel. And what you don't see is that they covered it with this crushed rock all the way up here. And then they covered it with sand above it. And then on top of it, they put this liner, 15 mil. Mil is 1,000 of an inch. So this is 15,000 of an inch thick vapor barrier. This is a standard run-of-the-mill vapor barrier. They put it under all buildings that they build in the methane fields. So here is a vapor, they put it above. The picture is from another project. And on top of the vapor barrier, you pour the slab. And here is the slab. Here is the building. After they did the slab, it's a brand new slab. Here are all these fancy cars that they are renting out, and they are in business. And outside the buildings here, you see all the vertical vent pipes that are connected to the underground pipe, and they are venting the building, and they are operating the building. After they've done that, we entered into the building and we tested the air inside the building. We needed to prove to the regulatory agencies that the air is clean, and all these little bottles or containers, this is our samplers. Here on the upper right, you see the sampler. It's about 1 gallon empty container, empty canister. And it is in total vacuum. There is a pressure gauge here, which we measure the vacuum with. Here we are, here's a pressure gauge. And above it, this is a pressure regulator and a valve. And we adjust it so that the air will enter into it. Excuse me for a second. Yeah, we adjust it so that the air will enter into it over 8 hours. We can adjust it so that the rate of flow will fill out the canister in 8 hours. So in this way, we get a sample of the air throughout 8 hours of operation of the building. After 8 hours, we come there, we collect those canisters, we send them to the lab tests what is inside, and we know what is in the building. And whenever we test inside the building, we also test outside the building. And here are the canister outside the building, because we need to compare what is inside with the outside. Interesting enough, in this case, the air outside was slightly more contaminated than the air inside. Both cases, both air inside and outside had readings of the contaminants, which came out evidently from outdoors. but they were at such levels that were not toxic. It's okay. I mean, all of us, when daily life, we go outside in the street. We usually, if we live in the big city, we usually inhale some vapors that could be toxic if we inhale them in large concentration, but when they are diluted, they are of no concern. So here we have those vapors, they are very diluted, and they are of no concern. The cost, investigation and reports, our client, I think they paid us about, if my memory serves me right, about $100,000 to do all the investigation and get the case cleared by the regulatory agency. The mitigation, I estimate, I don't know the exact number, I estimate cost them another $100,000. Overall $200,000. I know that they purchased the property at a highly reduced price because of the problems. So they thought they had a good deal. Here is another case. Here we were asked to do the phase 2, phase 1 and phase 2 only. This is a corner property. And it used to be a dry cleaners, and nowadays I think it's a doctor's office or maybe an accountant office. We did it back in 2006, and we sampled around it, and we found that the soil vapor was contaminated and contaminated in high levels. Not only that, we found that this cloud, in all probabilities and possibilities, migrated under this residential neighborhood here. And the reason I show you this example is because these residents here, and this is a pretty upscale neighborhood, these guys here, they are living on toxic vapor and they don't know. Usually we don't do, and the industry does not do phase 1 or phase 2 on residences, okay? Because there is hardly a possibility that there is contamination under areas that used to be always residential. But when there is a commercial on the other side of the fence, my advice to you is you better check and see what is there. You need to know what is behind the fence. And this is an example. We had another example like this where the vapor migrated under a kindergarten. The other case, it was commercial here on the street. There was a back alley here, and there was a kindergarten here, and they were sitting on a toxic cloud. Here is a case of an industrial facility and a case of contaminated soil, contaminated groundwater, and contaminated soil vapor. And our client owns this property, the entire property, and then they wanted to sell it. They were hard-pressed for cash, very hard-pressed for cash, but they could not sell it as contaminated. And the investigation was under the jurisdiction of the California EPA, Department of Toxic Substances Control. There was a consultant before us, and then we got retained to help solve the case. And here is what we did. First of all, we explored, we took soil samples. Here is one type of equipment, how we take soil samples. And here we are pushing those cylinders, hollow tubes, pushing them into the ground. Here is a machine, here is a diagram of the machine on the upper right side, and it's pushing those hollow tubes into the ground. You see the picture below, here is the hollow tubes coming out, and they are full of soil. And this soil we take and we send it to the lab. And on the left, you see the real life picture of this same machine that we use to poke these holes and take samples. So this is what we did for the property that I showed you. And also what we did, we installed groundwater monitoring wells. In order to do that, we need the big rigs. These are robust rigs. We can go down very deep. In this case, we had to go down 150 feet, I think, to install, about 150 feet to install the wells. On the right side, there is a diagram of a monitoring well. Usually, if it goes deep, it is a 4-inch well. And in this case, we installed our 4-inch wells, and you see it down, they are perforated here. We call it well screen, perforated at the bottom. When where we enter into groundwater, groundwater is about at this level here, and groundwater enters through the perforations into the well. And here is the pipe going up here. This is the top of the well. And we take our samplers, we lower it into the well, we collect the water samples, and there we go. So that's a water, this is a groundwater monitoring well. We install them around the building. Here is a diagram. Here is the building. This is the contaminator. This is the building that contaminated the property. There used to be a card box industries there, a factory, and they used glues, all kind of glues that had the toxic chemicals in them that got into the ground, and they contaminated the soil vapor, and groundwater. And so we went there, and with the machines that I showed you just a moment ago, we installed the 3 wells here in the red circle, 3 groundwater monitoring wells, 1 inside the building here, 1 outside the building, and 1 here in the next door at church. And in addition, in every well, we installed vapor samplers that will give us the soil vapor in the area of the wells. And also at the green spots here, we installed additional vapor samples right into the soil under the building. And we took the samples of groundwater from the wells, and we learned that the groundwater flows in this direction. And the readings that we got were pretty low. They were not low enough to close the case, but they were low enough so to such a degree that they don't have to clean up the groundwater, which was very good news. The soil vapor, here is how we took the soil vapor samples. Here is an example. This is one of the methods how we take the soil vapor samples. And what you see here, you see on the upper left side, you see our probe, which we install into the ground. We push it into the ground, here it has a perforated tip, and the tip is connecting to this tube, and the tube goes up and up and up and goes outside and connects to a vacuum pump. With the vacuum pump, we pull out the air. At first it's air, and then the vapor comes in, and we pull out, and when we get a representative vapor coming out this tube, we take the syringe and we push it in, like the guys in the lab take the blood samples from us. So we put the syringe here, and here you see on the upper right-hand side, here is a syringe, and it's being pushed into this connection here. You see this connection here, which on the left side here, you see the connection there. So here is a syringe, go inside, and we pull out the sample. Here is another example here of our technician. Here is a syringe, and here is the vacuum pump that I showed you in the diagram, and they pulling it out. And this is how we take the samples out, and we send them to the lab. Here is another case where we had to sample inside the building, and we push out the probe. You see here is the floor. We push out the probe into the building, into the slab, under the soil, and here is the tube, and here is the pump, and this is how we collect our samples. So this is how we collect soil vapor samples. And at the end, after we get the samples, here we get the readings. And those contours, like a topographic level, topographic contours, they show us the concentrations in the soil. And you see 300 here at the center, 300, this is the highest level that we read. Here in this well, we measured 406 in one of the chemicals. So it's 406 inside these, inside this sampler, which we took from around the well. And and then here is another one here, we measured 116, and here we measured only 10. So you can see that it's attenuating. The soil vapor is highest here under the building, and it goes less and less and less as we go outside of the building. So that is a map of the levels of the soil vapor inside the building, and you can see in the building and around it, and you can see how the vapor started here. Here is the highest point, and migrated and moved outside of the building, and even arrived at the church property here. And so this is the soil vapor, and the news are that the levels of the soil vapor are such that there are some concerns about penetration of the slabs and getting into the building and poisoning or polluting the air inside the building. So we move to the next step, which is to sample the air inside and around the building. So here we put our sampler inside the building. These are all the red spots inside the building. And we also take measurements outside of the building, so of the vapor, of what, and this tells us what the real thing, what people are inhaling when they are inside the building or outside the building. And here are our samplers. And here you see on the upper left side, the battery of samplers that we spread inside the building. Here is our technician, here is the canister, and here is the pressure regulator. And we adjusted that it will collect samples in 8 hours. Here it is inside the building. And here is one of the samplers outside the building. Well, at the end of the day, the news are that yes, we have vapor has entered into the building, but the good news is it's not major. It's in such levels that we can handle it by proper ventilation and proper maintenance of the slabs of the building. So the agency in charge, which is the Department of Toxic Substances Control, they make this a deal with the owner, and they issue a land use covenant and agreement. And basically what it is an agreement that they tell the owner, look, with the yes, the soil vapor is contaminated under the building, but because the levels inside the building are low enough, it's okay for us that you don't clean up the vapor under the building. You don't have to do anything about it. Just maintain the building, maintain the ventilation in good health or in good condition, and maintain the floor. Here are the floor. I mean, seal all the cracks in the floor. This is an old building. There are a lot of cracks. This is natural. Concrete slabs always have cracks. So seal them. And once a year, we go there, our company goes there, and we make a report. We do a report, we inspect the cracks, and we say, okay, good, bad, whatever, seal it again. And that's what they need to do. And they are home free. They don't have to remediate the soil, and they can sell the building right now with this limitation. Now, the land use covenant, which I showed you here, basically tells them, if you do this, you can live and operate forever in the building, but here are the limitations. You will never be able to make it into a kindergarten. You will never be able to put a hospital there. It has to stay commercial or industrial, which is okay with everybody. So that enables them to do the deal, and they sell the building, and they sell the property, and they sold it for $3.5 million. Property as clean with no problems is worth $4.5 million. The buyer bought it at a sizable discount because the seller was hard pressed for cash. They needed it desperately. So they sold it, and the cost of all the operations, all the environmental investigations to date, the previous owners had about $140,000 out of their pocket. Current owners so far spent with us about $60,000. They will have to spend about estimated another $100,000 until we close the case. And we will close the case. We are going to close it soon. I believe next year. We'll get them a clean bill of health. Everything will be closed. And overall cost will be about $300,000. So it was not a bad deal, I think, for them. And here is another case here. This is close to Playa Vista. And Playa Vista in city of Los Angeles. Yes, it's Marina del Rey is up here. Los Angeles Marina is over here. Los Angeles Airport is down there. This is Playa Vista, pretty well-known area. And the high-end areas, lots of expensive apartments here, apartment buildings, but it is contaminated. I mean, the soil vapor, I'm sorry, let me correct myself. Groundwater is contaminated. Groundwater is very shallow here. It's about maybe 10 feet, 20 feet. It's contaminated all under the area. And it has been being cleaned up since the late 1980s. It's an open case. And the contamination in the groundwater migrated here, outside to this neighborhood here. And here is a diagram just in colors showing, just to demonstrate to you that the color shows that contamination moved from the area here to the neighborhood. And we have a property here. Our client has a property, I should say had. They were our client but at the time. This was back in 2017, I believe. And they wanted to investigate the property here on Jefferson Boulevard to see if the soil there was contaminated. They were pretty close. This is the Playa Vista, Howard Hughes site. And they needed to know if they were contaminated as well. And they retained us to do the work. This property is up for, right now it's up for lease, and I pulled it out from the internet. So, and the case is very well known, so I'm not disclosing here anything which is confidential. And it is for lease, and here is a property on Jefferson Boulevard, the 11910, 11912. They tried to sell it from 2016 on, but they've not been able to sell it, and I'll show you in a moment why. And here is a property. It's pretty nice property, I think. And here it is. It's a commercial property, and it is advertised, as we speak, it's being advertised, I think, for lease, because they have not been able to sell it. So now they are leasing it. And it has been, I see, since March 17, it has been on the market. Its lot size is 7,500 square feet. Building is 6,500 square feet. And so we investigated the building. And what we found, here is the building here, and this rectangle. And here are our findings. The arrows show groundwater. This is the groundwater. It's about 30 feet under the building in this case, and it moving in the direction of the arrows and this way. So we found out the contaminated groundwater is entering under the building and going outside of the building. I'm under the building and going outside. But we also found that the building itself, the operations, the historical operation, contributed to the contamination. Now, they contributed. They cannot clean it up because it's coming contaminated from other sources, from Howard Hughes aircraft, from other sources. And this is an area problem. It's area problem. They cannot contaminate, they cannot decontaminate, they cannot clean up the groundwater all on their own. So there is a certain liability here, and if anybody of you is interested, I can explain it more in details if you call me. There is some liability here, and we estimated it. We said, well, okay, the list price was $3.5 million, and we estimated the liability anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 to the prospective buyers. And for the life of me, I don't understand why they have not sold it yet until now. Whatever. So, but this is a case. This is a real case. They wanted, I know they wanted, they were asking $3.5 million. I think they were amenable to give certain discount. This is a liability. The property is live and on the market. Here is another case. Our client owns this property here, the plaza, and it had a balloon payment of several $1 million coming. Could not refinance because groundwater was contaminated. They retained us, and to make the long story short, we found out that yes, groundwater was contaminated, but the contaminated water came from here. Across the street, kitty corner, there is this dry cleaners, and they contaminated in a very serious way, and it migrated under this building. Here is the map. Here is a cross section. The cleaners that contaminated are here in this area, and there is the heavy color shows that the contamination moved down here and moved and hit groundwater. The blue stuff, the blue level here, the blue strip is groundwater. It hit it and moved with the groundwater. The street is here, across the street into our property, and came here. Yes, our property caused a little bit of contamination here, but it was insignificant, really insignificant and immaterial. And we gave them a clean bill of health, and the case was closed by the government agency, and they got the loan from the bank. At the end, their cost to close the case, all of the investigations that we did, was close to $140,000. They had to retain an attorney because they had to fight the case with the regulators. The regulators were not amenable at first to close the case. So there was some fight, and eventually they agreed to close the case. I don't know how much they paid the attorneys, but I believe it was about $100,000. So this was their cost. They got the loan. Now this case one, this is another case. This is the bad one. In some of the cases, cases that is very hard, almost impossible to solve. Our client owns this property. Let's call them ABM, and there is this property here, DTSC, which originally was not our client. And we worked here, and they contaminated their area, and they had some small tanks there, and they did some contamination, and it was not bad. They were getting financed by the California Underground Storage Tank Cleanup Fund, and they could be financed up to $1.5 million to clean up this property. And by finance, that means that the cleanup fund would reimburse them for these expenses. So there is no out-of-the-pocket expense, and we were there working with them and working with the cleanup fund to solve this case. But what we found was that as we investigate that, we found that contamination keeps coming at us. It keeps coming. And groundwater goes this way. Like you see the blue arrow, this is the direction of groundwater. It's going this way. And we see the contamination is moving into our property from uphill. So then we got interested in this property, and we were retained to do some investigation here. There was a lot of work done here before us, a lot of work. And they already spent here $1.5 million here. And what was found was that they created basically a small lake of gasoline here a small puddle of gasoline here under their property, gasoline floating on the groundwater. It left their property, went under neighboring properties. The green color indicates gasoline that is dissolved in the water and is migrating as dissolved gasoline in the water down here. So we cannot clean up this property before these guys are getting cleaned up. That's obvious, that's common sense. However, these guys already spent all the money that they could have been reimbursed from the California Cleanup Fund, $1.5 million, did not solve the case. They went bankrupt, they abandoned the property, and that's where we are. And so this property is stuck. And the long and short of it is that the DTSC property, again, the property up here, this is the DTSC property, they already spent $1.5 million and went bankrupt. The ABM property down here already spent $600,000 and stopped because they cannot solve the case right now. So the case is pending, and I can get in more details if you get interested, but believe me, this is a hard case. So we put it no end in sight, and we show this lady, which is kind of looks like she's a little bit in despair. So that's kind of demonstrates the case here. Here's another case, and this is a nice case. The interested party calling us, they want to purchase this property. We removed the tanks here back in early 1990s, and for the late Mrs. Martin. And there used to be a gasoline station, and the black patch here is where the tanks used to be. We pulled them out, and there was some contamination there. We cleaned up the contamination, and they got a clean bill of health. Case closed. So we get the call from the interested investor, and they want to purchase the property, and they say, well, Ami, what do you think? We have a clean bill of health, everything, are we okay? And I said, well, almost. You need to realize one thing here. Here is the diagram of the area. Here is where the tanks used to be. Here is where we removed them. And here is again the diagram, and here is a conceptual cross-section here on the right side. and we show the tanks that were above it, and we tell them, look, yes, we pulled the tank. Yes, we cleaned up soil about here, clean up the soil. But realize that the contamination in the soil went down deep. It went down all the way to groundwater and about 100 feet down below you. It's contaminated. It is contaminated to such a degree that it does not require cleanup. But once you purchase a property, you probably will want to redevelop it, he says, of course. And this is a small property, and you will go subterranean. He says, yes, I will. And I say, how deep will you go? He says, I will go down 30 feet. I say, if you go down 30 feet, you are going to hit this contaminated soil here. And here is a case, another case where it happened to us. This is a school that our client was building in Culver City. And as we're excavating, we hit contaminated soil. And it was okay. It did not have to clean it up. The contamination was not that bad, but it was giving out toxic vapors to the workers on site, and all construction work stopped dead. They could not continue, and eventually they had to take away. Here you see us spraying water to quench the contamination. They had to take away a couple of thousand cubic yards of contaminated soil at extra cost. So we tell our interested party, here is how we hold the soil away. We tell them, look, in this property that I showed you before, it will cost you about $150,000 once you hit the contamination when you redevelop the property. This will be your cost. Now you know what it's going to cost you. And we did not charge him for our advice. Here's a case, a very interesting case. It's right now, it's live. It's right now for sale. It's in Costa Mesa. Our client is looking to sell it. And it's 2193, 2195 Pacific Avenue in Costa Mesa. So here is the Mesa, here is Pacific Avenue here. Here is the bluff. Here is Santa Ana River, Huntington Beach, you see on the right side, Newport Beach on the left side. You see the ocean, a nice ocean breeze, a nice area. And here is this landscape. I think this is the park, and you can go walk there. You can ride horses there. It's a nice area, and you can see it's pretty built. It's pretty densely built all around. And our client owns this piece of land, which is vacant land, and they want to sell it. Here is another look. This is 2 lots, another look of the property. And you see it has a flat area here, and then on the right side there is a bluff here. And here is another look of the area of the lot, and you can see the bluff here, and here is the property. And what I want to draw your interest into is here. You see here in the background, you see this property, and they expanded their project into the bluff. So you can, if you want, I mean, I think. You can expand and build, put some retaining walls and use the bluff, because you see the property here, it extends all the way down to ground level, to the bottom of the canyon here, all right? So here's what it is, and here it is for sale. Okay, listing price, I'm not a real estate broker, so I'm just an environmental consultant, but this is my client, and I am allowed to show you this information. So listing price $2 million. All right, total lot size about an acre, and half of it is flat and half of it is sloped. And our client at the time did this conceptual development plan, where they submitted it to the city of Costa Mesa back in 2013. We were involved in it for a short while in 2013, and this is a conceptual plan. A purchaser, a buyer probably can develop their own plan, but they got a positive nod from the city for this plan. 10 single residence units here with a subterranean spaces here. And very important here is to look at here to see this subterranean development, because any development here will have to go underground for the parking spaces and beyond. So this factor is important, and I'll show you in a moment why. And you can see that the original idea was to develop the flat area and leave the sloped area undeveloped. And we as an environmental consultant, we ask our client in our simple-minded environmental mind. We are not developers by no means, but we said, why don't you go down to Bluff, okay? And we even used our artistic acumen, not so much artistic talent, to show what we think can be done here. I mean, put additional building, put a swimming pool, here is a fountain, put some stables. Maybe you can go, maybe you can do it, maybe you can do a lot more than that in this property. So, but here is the quote unquote secret. It is not secret. It is an old abandoned historic landfill. In the past, there was they used it as a landfill, and they filled it with you see the dark stuff is petroleum contaminated soil. It is not bad. It is coming from oil exploration fields where they drill all these wells to explore for oil. And in the old times, in the early 1900s, they needed to get rid of this soil from the oil fields. So it has some crude petroleum, some asphalt in it. It's not too bad, but it has to be removed. And not only that, anybody that developed the property will have to remove all these artificial fill, imported fill from there. And it's going down anywhere from about 12 feet down to 23 feet. It will have to be removed and to get the property authorized. This is another cross section of the field, and here is another, and this is the slope. It will have to be stabilized. Our client, the property is listed for $2 million. At this time, there is a 2015 estimate by another consultant. We got somebody there. Okay. So for $800,000 to get clean closure, the 2015 estimate assumes that the closure will be done separately from the development. We told our client that this is a wrong number because the excavation and getting rid of the soil will have to be done of the development anyway, and really it has to be built into the cost of the development. So they need the current estimate, and we may be working on a more current estimate. Hey, Kelly Law, unmute yourself, please. Kelly Law, Kelly, she doesn't hear me. Kelly Law, please unmute. Kelly Law, please mute. Okay, no, she hasn't mute. Okay, anyway, so all right.
那个影片里面的狗才好笑，那个狗是怎么训练的？它会藏钱，是学人家学它还是它学人呢？
Okay, looks like she's muted. She's muted, so somebody else is talking.
临时的，然后那个狗它就在影响给你看，让你笑。来，哎呀，不带了。
Okay.
掉下来了。
Mandy, are you muted? Yeah, Mandy is muted. Okay, everybody, please check yourselves. Make sure you are muted so we don't get this background. Okay. All right. So I'll try to talk over them. So here is another case, case 11, superficial soil contamination, and this is an 8-acre site in the city of Riverside. And
我以为他在铺地。
okay.
对对对，不是。
I'm sorry.
偷钱。藏钱。
Michael, are you mute? Yes, he's mute. Well, somebody here is not mute. All right, so let me try. So here's another case. I hope you guys hear me.
It looks like Kelly Law is the only one not muted, Ami.
Okay. Thank you, man. Kelly, she doesn't listen. Okay, she's quiet now. No, she's not. All right. Maybe we can set her a chat. Just a second. I don't
你
even
对
know.
他从哪里？他平
Hey.
常在那小人里面，从警察
All right. Okay, so case 11, superficial soil contamination, city of Riverside. It's an 8-acre site. Soil is contaminated with lead. Here you see our diagrams. The hot spots are high level of contamination, contaminated with PCBs, and they need to clean it up. The contamination is going down about a couple of feet, and it's not that bad. It will be cleaned up once they move to develop the site. They have to regrade it, and they will remove it, and it will be just an incremental cost to clean up this site. Here is a recent case that we did in very recently in Silver Lake in the city of Los Angeles. The property used to be Terminix, soil contamination, and Terminix operated here for many years. They used to mix and distribute and mix and sell pesticides. And they sold it to our client in 2003. And before they sold it, they cleaned it up. They worked with the DTSC, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and they cleaned it up at the time to commercial levels because it was a commercial property. Our client purchased it in 2003, and they wanted in 2017 to redevelop it into residential. So they retained us, and we went to the DTSC, and DTSC said, well, okay, you want to make it residential, you have to clean it up to residential standards, which are much more strict because you are here, not only you are going to be residential, but you are surrounded here by all these residences. And so we are getting retained to help them to clean it up and close the case and make it ready for residential development. Case is sensitive because, as I said, residences here in this building here, we have a family with a 2-year-old baby and many kids around here, and we have to be very careful because we are dealing with soil that is contaminated with pesticides. We investigate and we find that we need to do some surgical cleanup. These are all these little excavations that we need to excavate through the property, and with a surgical knife remove all the contaminations, the leftover contamination that will make it okay for residential development. So here we are demolishing the property, and you see this guy spraying water, and this is very important. You see in a moment why. Here more, we are spraying water all over the place because this demolition involves materials which are toxic, and demolition usually generates dust. And we have these neighbors around here, and we don't want to send toxic dust for them to inhale. So we have to be very careful, and everything is done here underwater to quench the dust. And we monitor. Here you see on this ladder here, there is a inside the site monitor, inside property monitor. This is for the protection of the workers inside, plus we know what we are generating inside the property. Every worker here, this worker, not every worker, some workers, this worker is carrying such a monitor on himself here. This one is carrying another monitor, and we test them regularly. Not only that, here we go around the site. On the property lines, we put these monitors. You see 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sides of the properties, and this is my associate, Del Fleming. He's in his spare time, he's a CPA, and he's a very good accountant and also very good guy with computers. So I can say, Del, come over here, help me with these instruments, because these are really computers and they are working non-stop. And we take non-stop samples of the air all the time, and we go and check on them every 30 minutes. We check on them, and if they give us a high reading, we shut down the operation. So we had to shut down the operation several times because we had to protect the neighbors from any dust and that coming their way. And so it was sometimes it was pretty tense. And here is this is from another project, but just to show you that we excavate the property. And Here is, and we take samples from the bottom of the excavations. Here is an excavation again from another project, but just to demonstrate that once we excavate, we take samples from the bottom of the excavation. We take it with a backhoe, and here is a jar, and we take the sample, we put it in the jar, we send it to the lab, and we know if the bottom of the excavation is deep, and this tells us if we excavated deep enough, if we removed all of the contamination. We also take samples from the walls of the excavation. And this is how we demonstrate that everything is clean. Here is the real life example. Here is a real life picture. This is our site. Here is the top area of the soil that we removed, about 1,000 cubic yards. And we took it away. Site is clean now. And cost of the remediation, demolition remediation, and our cost was close to about 500 plus minus. I think that the cost of our services was around $140,000, and they got a clean property. And so now they are building on it, developing it into 16-unit apartment building. And this is Silver Lake in California. It's becoming a high-end, and I think they will make a very good income on it. Here is another property, Pico Rivera. Used to be gasoline stations in the 1950s. The reason I show this Impala here is because I saw a picture here. This is historical pictures. I saw it and said, interesting, what year it is. And I went on the web and I found out that this was a 1959 model Impala. So I knew that this picture was taken around 1959. And it used to be a service station. And in the old time, here, service stations, what they did in the old time, when they had those batteries, they would empty the batteries, the used batteries, before they send them to recycle, that would empty them onto the soil. And the batteries, the car batteries contain lead. The acid contains lead. So you got lead in the soil. And here, what again we found, here is a site. It's now vacant land, and there is a patch of soil here, and it's contaminated with lead. It's not a big deal because once they redevelop it, they will regrade and the entire site, and they will take the upper soil anyway. So the contamination is going down 2 feet, and the cost will be just, as I said, incremental to the development. And here is a case, I call it the incredible case of the unknown underground storage tank. And it is incredible because it demonstrates how important it is to do a phase one correctly. And some of the liabilities that could be in doing a phase one. So a consultant did a phase one here, and we were retained to do, they decided the phase two needed, and we were retained to, this is an industrial property here, and we were retained to do the phase two, which is drilling and sampling, and to see if the property, this industrial property, contaminated the soil and groundwater. And as soon as we move in, because of my personal experience with the gasoline station and underground storage tanks, I see this pipe here, and I say, this is a vent pipe of an underground tank. So, and an underground gasoline tank. So where is the tank? The phase one did not tell me that there are tanks on the property. I might be drilling into some tanks here. And so I'm getting very interested in this pipe, and I look around and I look at the phase one, and here is what it says. It says, one metal covered vault was noted in the northern portion of this area. The consultant was unable to open the vault to identify the contents. However, this feature appeared to be associated with on-site utility connections. So they assumed, okay, they made an assumption here, that it was connected to utilities. This was a very wrong assumption and very dangerous one, because it didn't take me much to open this lid. All what I needed was my little crowbar and the screwdriver, and I opened it, and here are the connections to the underground tank. Here is a fill pipe, and here is a vent pipe. So I know I have a tank here on the property. So I call my guys that know how to explore for buried objects, and here we are. I've worked with them since 1988. I know these guys. And here we are going, this is a ground penetrating radar, and these are electromagnetic magnetometers, electromagnetic device. And they are very professional, and they tell me, Ami, here what you have, 4,000 gallon tank under the surface, and here is the vent pipe going all the way here to the vent pipe. And it is filled with water. So right now I have a 4,000 gallon tank filled with water. We are supposed to do phase 2. We tell the owners and the client, the buyer, and we get retained to pull out the tank. The first step to pull out the tank, and by the way, it cost them another $40,000 to pull out the tank. The first step is to empty it, to pull out the water. So we get the vacuum truck, we pump out the water, we send it to the recycler, and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I get the call. Recycler will not take the water in. Why? Because the water is contaminated with hexavalent chromium. Now, this is a nasty stuff, and I put here this little crab, symbol of a cancer, because it's cancerous. It's very toxic. And it's not only cancerous, it impacts all kind of other stuff in the body and make people very sick. So it's bad. And the recycler doesn't want to take it. Eventually, we had to wait a couple of days. We had to run some more samples, some more testing. Eventually, they took it at a premium. And now we have the tank to remove. So here is a picture of the tank. And remember, this tank used to contain 4,000 gallons of water with hexavalent chromium. Part of the removal process, we have to cut a hole in the tank here in order to vent it out and clean it out completely and make it safe, because this used to be a gasoline tank. And gasoline tanks, if you don't vent them out, they can explode on you and it can be a bomb, okay? So it's not, it's something you have to pay attention to. And so we cut the hole, we vent the pipe, and now it is safe. And my operator says, Ami, go and take a look inside. And I take a look inside, and what do I see? Here is the bottom of the tank, and here is the side of the tank. Here you see the circle. This is the cylindrical side of the tank. Here is those big holes gaping at me from the bottom of the tank. And these are big holes. Here I put my little devil there, and it shows I can stick my head into them. So we are very concerned, because we were dealing here with water contaminated with chromium, and we are very concerned that it might have leaked down to groundwater. And if it leaked to groundwater, it would be a multi-million-dollar cleanup job. But lucky enough, the client was lucky and everybody was lucky. Here you see the clay at the bottom of the excavation, and this clay and silt got cemented with the moisture that came out from the tank. It cemented it and it plugged the tank, and everything came out clean. So they lucked out. I mean, they really, because it could have been a multi-million-dollar job and a bad one. So let me skip that. And so what is phase 1? So now let us go and deal with the phase 1. What is the phase 1 process? What do we do in the phase 1 process? What does it do? What does it not do? The phase 1, we work by a protocol of the ASTM, American Society for Testing and Material. They tell us how to run the phase 1 environmental site assessment. And they tell us that we need to be concerned. They define what is called recognized environmental conditions. And our purpose with the phase 1 was to identify the concerns, and the concerns are called recognized environmental conditions. And what is a recognized environmental condition? It is the presence, and this is, by the way, this is a very complex definition. But I'll give it to you anyway, and then I'll make it a little bit more simple. The presence or likely presence of any hazardous substances or petroleum products in, on, or at a property, 1, due to release to the environment, 2, under conditions indicative of a release to the environment, 3, under conditions that pose a material threat of a future release to the environment. And this is a complex definition that I broke it up, and I broke it up to 36 different definitions. 36 different concerns are all lumped into one sentence. So to make it simple, in concept, what we are looking for is, we are looking for hazardous substances or petroleum. There is a type here, hazardous substances or petroleum products. We are looking for the presence or likely presence. Could they be? May they be? I mean, are they the past, present, or future releases? We are looking for such releases or substances that generally present threat to human health or the environment. Not all contamination is a threat. We are only interested in such contamination which is a threat. And we are only interested in such cases that would be the subject, generally would be the subject of an enforcement action if brought to the attention of appropriate governmental agency. And this is a very important condition because I mean, many of our phase ones revolve around this last condition, the concern, because it happened to us quite a time that we find contamination there, and it's not immediately obvious if it is bad or not. I mean, and because bad is a matter of definition. Bad is really what the regulator, what the Cal EPA would consider to be bad, and their definitions for bad are changing in time. Okay, so what is bad? Well, really bad, or what is threat? Really what is threat to human health is what the government is telling us it is threat. I'm sorry, but this is the case. This is how it is. So the government is giving us certain cleanup levels all the time. So we need to look at the contamination and decide whether or not the regulator will get interested in it. And many a time we have to evaluate it, and it's not an easy evaluation. So this is part of our work as a professional consultant and experience to evaluate whether or not regulators will get interested in the case. Here is an example. Our client owns this property. It's in Redwood Country, Northern California, close to Oregon border. And the entire, it's Redwood Country. There used to be a lumber industry, and the lumber would ship down the river here, get down. There was a lumber plant here, and they used all kinds of toxic substances to process the lumber, and the entire area is contaminated. It's an EPA contaminated site. Groundwater is very shallow, and it is all contaminated. Our client owns this property, is calling us, says, Ami, I want to redevelop it. I tell him, look, without doing a phase one even, I'm telling you, you are contaminated. There is no way that the contamination moved under your property, so you did not cause it, but there is a likely presence of substances here. And yes, you will not be called by the EPA to clean it up, but if you want to redevelop it, nobody will let you develop it unless you clean it up. So here you are. So this is an environmental condition. Here is another case. This is near Beverly Hills. Here is Beverly Center. La Brea Tar Pits in this area. The entire area used to be an oil field. I mean, good chunk of the city of Los Angeles and LA County used to be oil fields. So we have a client here, they own a property and they are sitting on an oil well. It's abandoned oil well, but still it is considered to be a concern. Here is a condition which we call de minimis. De minimis means minimal. We are not concerned about it. And we flag it out, but we say we are not concerned. This is a car repair shop, and we see this contamination, but it's just superficial. It's on concrete. We see there's a hoist here, and we're telling the client and the user, don't worry about it. This is minimal. We don't think there is going to be any concern here. Yes, there are some spots. Yes, there may be contamination, but the threat is minimal. Don't worry about it. This is not a recognized environmental condition. At the end of our phase one, we issue a report. Okay, and here is a report. This is the cover page of our report, and this is how it looks like. So what is in the report? The component of the reports are, first there is a user. The user of the report is the one that invite us to do the report for them. They are the user. And the user may include an acquirer, people that want to purchase a property. They want to know if there are any concerns. It could be a potential tenant. Somebody wants to get into a tenancy there. They want to know if it's contaminated or not. Owner of the property, they want to sell the property. They don't want surprises. A lender, property manager, anybody. Anybody can ask us to do a phase one. And we had cases where somebody got interested in a property and he says, Ami, I want you to do a phase one. Well, I need to know what is inside the property. I do my best. I do all the record search. At the time, we didn't have yet a drone. Today we have drones. At the time, we did not have drones. So in one case, we just retained a helicopter. We flew over the property and we took pictures from above of the property. Today we have drones. We can do it with drones. So anybody can retain us to do a phase one. In order to do a phase one, we have to be environmental professionals. The EPA has a very broad, not broad, I should say, an expanded definition, a whole article of definition who is an environmental professional that can do and qualify to do a phase one. Here is a link to this definition, and but simply just, if you are interested in the definition, go put EPA, good environmental professional, and you will get the definition. I'm happy to tell you that I'm qualified as an environmental professional by the definition of the EPA. And part of the phase one, we review records. We have to review all kinds of records, thousands of records, federal, state, local records. We have to review them and evaluate them all the way to the time the property was first developed, okay? So if it was first developed in 1895, and I had a case like this, I have to go all the way to 1895 to research record all the way down to those years. And we need to do environmental cleanup liens. This is simple. We can get it by internet research and or from title companies. If there are any, if the government ever imposed a lien on the property because the government had to clean it up. So this is an environmental cleanup liens. We have to find out if we have such. We look into aerials. Here is aerial photography. We take aerials all the way back where we cannot go earlier than the 1920s because it's about when people started to fly. But we get whatever we can, and here is a series of aerials all the way to the earliest ones, and we inspect them with magnifying glass, and we become kind of specialists in it to see what was on and around the property. We take topographic maps. Topographic maps could be a very good source of information for us. And again, here is on the left side, this map goes all the way to the 1890s. And they give us information about the property and about the surrounding properties, because we need to know also if surrounding properties might have impacted the property. We research historical city directories. They are a good, very good source of information, because these directories have names, and the names many times with commercial and industrial properties, the names many times represent the type of business that used to be there. And so all these directories today are digitized, and we can get them through a specialized service to get us what is there. And here is, for example, one report from such a directory. And here is a summary of the report. And it tells us this is a property 2205 Durfee Avenue in El Monte. It is a property which is near our property of interest. And you see 1957, Shell service. It was, we know it was a service station. 1994, they did alignment, there was a body shop. They did auto sales, they did a car wash, okay? So just by the name, we have an idea what was there. We get research of government databases. We get over 130 government databases. We get records on them. This could be thousands and thousands of records. By the time we finish our report, we have about 1,200 pages in our report. And we get it plotted on maps like this. You see how property is here in the middle, and the circles are circles of distance. This is a quarter of a mile, half a mile, 1 mile. And those properties which are flagged with red triangles are properties of interest around neighboring properties. Those which are black squares are also properties of interest. And the reason these are black and these are red is black is downhill, red is uphill. And it has a meaning for us, what property is uphill and what property is downhill, because this is how we evaluate the potential impact on our property. So, for example, take this property A here, which is close to our property, and we click on this triangle, and it opens a drop-down menu for us, and it opens all kinds of reports that were done on this property. And then we pull out these reports and we read them. We read each and every report, and sometimes it could be thousands of pages in this report, and we read them because we want to know if there was what was here. Was it any potential for impact on our property? So we really look into all of these guys to see if they might have caused any problem for us. We interview the owners. We have to conduct interviews. past, present owners, operators, occupants, every one of those that are available to us, we interview them on the uses of the property. And when we interview them, even before we interview them, we give them a checklist. And you see there are 25 documents on this checklist. And we tell them, hey guys, if you have any of these documents, give them to us. Have you ever had assessment reports done before? Give it to us. Have you ever had material safety data sheets? We want to see each one of them. Community right to know plan. If you have safety plans, we want to see if this is an industrial property, they better have a safety plan. We want to see the safety plans. What else? If they generate hazardous waste, we want to see all of their hazardous waste reports. So there is a lot of documents that we request from our clients and the property owners and the user to give us, if they have them, only if they have them. If they don't have them, don't worry about it. This is part of our research. And then we look into the sale price. If the property is offered for sale, we are requested by the standards to check on the purchase price. How does it compare for the property value? If the purchase price, if it's this property is offered for sale for $700,000, and we have a general idea that the clean property value is $5 million, we need to ask them, why do you offer the property for $700,000? What is the reason? Okay, suspicion, right? We have to check for it. And then we do property inspection. And we look into every nook and cranny in the property, every crack in the concrete, we look into it. And we generate our photo log. I mean, in this particular case, I had about 400 pictures. I did not put all of them. I select them and selected about 44 images, 44 photographs, and create this map. And it shows you, oh, here is our subject property here. And these are surrounding properties, and we go all around, we take pictures, because we want to know the neighbors. We want to know what they do. How can they impact our property? And here on the left side, these are all the pictures, the images that we take inside the property. And eventually we have our photo log, and it's very, very informative. And when we issue our report, and in our report, we have the executive summary. Executive summary, we have the findings, we have the opinions, conclusions, and recommendations. Findings is more or less objectives. Okay, what do the reports tell us? All the list of the findings, thousands of findings. Opinions, this is subjective. This is our opinions. It's like a doctor's. Sometimes you have two doctors who will give you different opinions. The same with consultants. This is up to the consultant. And it happened to us in times that our opinion differed from the opinion of another consultant. Then conclusions and recommendations. The executive summary, that's about a page and a half usually, and our clients usually they only read the very end of the executive summary where they get our opinions and conclusions. So there we are. Then we move to the phase 2 in case we need to do a phase 2, and we recommend a phase 2. Then, so what is a phase 2? Well, let's touch on it real quick. What phase 2 environmental site assessment? What does it do? Okay, what does a phase 1? What does a phase 2 does? What does it do? All right, so it's important to know, and I showed you many examples before of sites that we investigated. You needed to know that phase 2 is only a yes or no answer. It does not tell you how big the contamination is or how wide. It's a yes or no answer. And here is an example, 2 different sites. On the right-hand side, we were concerned about lead. This developer wants to develop the site. There is a freeway here. In years past, we used to use leaded gasoline, and leaded gasoline would be airborne. The fumes would carry lead in them, would be airborne and spread on neighborhoods, properties along the freeways. So they want to develop this property. It was a vacant land for many years. We tell them you have to sample for lead. Phase 1, you have to sample for lead. So phase 2, we move in. We do this matrix sampling here, and we take samples all over the property, and we combine many samples to save on the cost. And we, at the end of the day, we tell them yes or no. I mean, you have contamination of lead, you don't have contamination of lead. In this case, they were home free, there was no contamination of lead. We could have found out that there was, say, 1 point here or 1.0 of lead, And if we were to find some points of contamination, let's, for example, this point has lead in it, we would have told them that they need to excavate, to investigate more around it. It would be then an expanded phase 2. On the left side here, the phase 2 here, the phase 1 consultant, it's not our company, the phase 1 consultant was concerned about toxic vapor. So we went on site and we punched those 15 holes all around the property. We sucked out the vapor to see if at any point there is toxic vapor. The answer was there was only in a couple of points. There was one point here and one point here that there was a little bit of toxic vapor. And we told them that they needed to investigate a little bit more here and a little bit more here. So the phase 2 was just to tell them if they were or were not contaminated. Then we came back and tell them, look, guys, you need to investigate a little bit more here and here. This would be an extended or expanded phase 2. Cost of phase 2, cost of phase 1 or phase 2. Phase 1 usually you'll find prices anywhere from $1,800 to $3,000, depending on the type of the property. Phase 2, you'll find them anywhere from $6,000 to $20,000 on regular commercial properties, industrial properties. It could be a lot higher. So what does it not do? You need to understand also what phase 2 does not do. It does not do a site assessment, as I also indicated before. This site, which I showed you before, where the gasoline station was here and our client was there, by the time we did our site, we did just a portion of a site assessment here. It was $250,000, $250,000 to define what is going on here. So when you do a phase 2 for purchase of a property, you are not going to invest $250,000. So this is not a phase 2. Time schedule. Phase 1 report usually in 3 weeks. Phase 2 reports usually in 3 weeks. There is a lot of time usually in between that buyers and sellers take to negotiate what we tell them, to negotiate between themselves. So therefore, we always advise the buyers, especially the sellers, do your phase 1, if needed phase 2, before you enter escrow, because you don't want to find in the middle of escrow what you have there, and you don't want to find 1 week before you enter escrow what is there. You really want to be prepared. So really have time, okay? Because in our experience, if there is something there, you will then ask us what to do. You will start consulting. You will, your buyer will want to know. There will be time, and then the phase 2, and then if there are some results of the phase 2, again, it will take time. So better be prepared. Sometimes we get retained to do a combination, phase 1 and phase 2, at one fell swoop. It's just one action. And the way we do it is we move to do the phase 1. Take us 2 weeks to know if there is a problem. So the rest of the time is to write the report. But 2 weeks, we know what is there. And then we can tell the client, look, you are contaminated. Yeah. So then he says, okay, do a phase 2. We move to do the phase 2 right away. In 3 weeks, we finish the phase 2, 1 week to report. In 6 weeks, we can do the whole stuff. So phase 2 and phase 2 combination, we can do it in 6 weeks. Real quick, few words about remediation. In case we need to do it, just general knowledge about generally known and conventional ways of remediation. Dig and haul, very simple, just excavate and take it away. It is limited in that you can only dig or go deep that far with an excavator before you have to get into a very, very fancy shored supported excavations, and then it becomes very expensive. So dig and haul, okay? That's one way of cleaning up. Another way is air sparging. What is air sparging? We use it to clean up contaminated groundwater. Here you see we stick this well down to the water. Here's the dash line here. This is the level. This is the groundwater table. Above it is unsaturated soil above. Below the dashed line is saturated soil, and this is where groundwater is, and it is contaminated. So we stick this pipe there, and it is perforated, and we blow air through the perforation into the groundwater, into the aquifer. The action is very similar to what you have in the aquarium. Here you have an air bubbler at the bottom of the aquarium, and it bubbles air, and air bubbles go up. Now, if there is any contamination in the water, which is dissolved, contamination in the water is always dissolved, like sugar, like salt, like anything else. If it is in the water, and if it is volatilized, then it will volatilize and it will move into the vapor, into the air, and it will, so any contamination that can volatilize, like gasoline, like solvents, anything that is volatile, will move into these air bubbles and will go up, and the bubbles go up to the surface, they explode here, and they release the vapor into the soil. So here we are. Here are the bubbles, they rise up, they release into the soil, and there is this pipe here in the soil, and then you can suck out the vapors. So this is how we clean up solvents, volatile solvents from groundwater. Here is another case here on the right-hand side. Sometimes we just put a barrier on the site, on the contamination, spread the soil above it, and there you go. Like they do it in landfills, some they do it in golf courses. They don't want to excavate, they don't need to remediate, they just don't want to put a golf course there. So you put this liner, you put soil, and there you go. And sometimes a very bad case, you just put a fence around it and you close it up. This is a very important tool for transactions in real estate, land use covenant. And I showed you one example today of a land use covenant. What it does is where the government agrees that there is a contaminated property, but you don't have to clean it up. You can leave it contaminated till the end of the days, but with the limited use, the restricted use. And they tell you, well, okay, you can have an industrial property there, you can have an auto garage, all that, but you cannot have a kindergarten, you cannot have a hospital, you cannot have a church, you cannot have an old people home, all right? You are limited to commercial and industrial. So this is it has environmental restrictions. And they put this, and you can enter, you can take a site, and right now we are involved in such a site, and where we are going to stop the cleanup. They did a lot of cleanup, $500,000, and we told the client, stop it, go and start negotiating for a land use covenant. You will be able to get it there. And you don't intend to, it's going to be a shopping plaza, and it can be done. So that's a very important tool. By oxidation, we can inject chemical injection, and we can inject by high pressure chemicals into the ground to react with the contamination and basically clean it up. That's a very limited tool. If the contamination is limited to vapor in the soil, I showed you before some examples, we can just suck it out with well. Here we have wells connected here, and we suck it out. Then if we have a gasoline station and we have gasoline in the groundwater floating or dissolved, we can clean it up with bacteria. Bacteria, natural bacteria, they love gasoline, they love petroleum. All what we need to do, we need to feed them some nutrients, and they start working. They are happy workers, we don't have to pay them, we don't have workers' comp, no insurance, no overtime, they just work. All we have to do is give them a little bit of food, and they start working, and they clean up the contamination. And then we have Mother Nature. Mother Nature eventually will clean up the contamination. Sooner or later, it will clean it all up. So there are cases where we leave it to a natural attenuation, and there we are. So that's about what I had to say, and let me finish up with this nice quotation, which is a great aim of education is not knowledge but action, by Herbert Spencer. So knowledge is important, but it's only as important as it leads us to take a certain action. I mean, knowledge without action, why waste the time? I mean, I read the Western books. I love Western, so I read Western books, but this is just for entertainment. So some knowledge are for entertainment, but it's not for action. So that's okay if you read something for entertainment. That's okay, I guess. But we want action, especially when all the knowledge that we collect is for action. So I hope that my lecture today will enable you for some action. And you are always welcome to call me. You can raise question right now, and I'll open the floor for questions. And anybody has questions, go ahead and shoot. I'm listening. So seems like there are I don't get any questions coming. Anybody that wants question, please unmute yourself. And let me see if I have a chat here. Chat, Jen. No, I don't see the chat option. So maybe we don't have chat. So, all right. So you are welcome to call me. All right. Call me anytime and we'll talk. And thank you very much for attending. And feel free to contact me anytime. And that's the end of the lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ami. That was great.
You're very welcome. Thank you.